Hello and welcome to the Video Creator Show, where we talk the juicy details of how to succeed on YouTube. And what better way to do that than to talk directly to someone who has done it. James Q. Quick publishes weekly videos about web development. His channel is all about the latest and greatest in web development, and currently he shares it with as many people as he possibly can. He is a YouTube success story with over 160,000 subscribers and over 11.5 million total channel views. Today, I'll be speaking with James about how he built his online presence, and that includes his podcast called Compressed.fm. But first, the Video Creator Show is brought to you by VidChops.com, an editing service that helps take the burden of editing off your back. Check out VidChops.com to see how you can save yourself tons of time and energy while taking your YouTube channel to the next level. James, how you doing today?
What's up? Doing good. Excited to talk about content. It's a fun topic of mine.
For sure. So you are in the land of coding tutorials, essentially. I feel like this is a pretty saturated market on YouTube, and a lot of your videos that have done super well, they're only like a year old. I'm just kind of wondering, just to start, how did you break into this? Was there like a strategy here? Because at least for me, so I majored in computer science, and I have seen all kinds of coding tutorials. I'm truly impressed that you were able to break into it this late in the game. You 5 JavaScript concepts you have to know. I mean, that's a good title. That's one of your biggest videos at over 1 million views. Tell me about your process. How'd you do this?
Yeah, I think it comes in different phases. And kind of the origin story is I had no thought process of like building an audience or growing a channel or a personal brand or anything. It was first and foremost just a means to an end. So I was doing workshops and I would teach people the same thing over and over again, and they would have the same questions over and over again. So I figured, why not create videos where when they ask a question, I could just point to, well, here, go watch this video that I did. So the first thing I ever did was like 15 videos on how to make games with a tool called Construct 2, which is a lot of fun. I did like tons of workshops with it with students and high school and university and that sort of stuff. And that was, again, just kind of a logistical thing of like, I can help more people and answer the same questions more if I just document the answer itself and have people go and refer to it. Mm-hmm. And then I did a few things off and on with Microsoft. Like, they were getting into video at the time, and I did like a video series on Channel 9, which was something that Microsoft owned, and did a couple of videos on my channel, and then kind of forgot about it because I changed jobs. I kind of changed careers to a certain extent. But then after changing and not doing content for a few years, I realized I missed it. Like, I missed creating content. I missed speaking at conferences. Basically all the things I do now, I was really missing. And so I decided I would start doing it again. And that was maybe 4 years ago. And at that point I decided like, this is something I want to take seriously. I still didn't know what growth was. I still didn't know what I was capable of. I still had no plans for like a personal brand or anything, but I decided I was going to do it consistently. And so I did that. And then I kept seeing other developer creators around me really build their audiences. So I saw my friend Jesse from the Code Stacker channel go from 0 to 100,000 subscribers in a year. My friend Florin Pop went from 0 to 100,000 subscribers in less than a year. Friend Anya Kubo went to 100,000 subscribers around the same time. And so I looked at all these people, and that was like my inspiration of like, one, it was kind of defeating to see them have the success that I wanted but didn't have, but it also then opened my mind to say like, that sort of growth is possible. So you mentioned the 5 concepts JavaScript developers need to know being one of my most popular videos. I'd always like done research and heard other creators talk about these spikes and growth, where if you keep being consistent, eventually you'll hit some of these things that just take off, and that's how your channel grows. And I had a really down period where I was like, that's not happening for me. And I thought it was this like thing that I would just never get to. And eventually one did. And then a second one did. And I did a guest video on a couple of other big channels. And those individual like 4 or 5 different spikes really just took my channel to the next level. So that's kind of where it's been the last 2 years, is a couple of videos and a couple of external opportunities really driving the growth of the channel.
Hmm. And was there anything different in particular that you feel like you did with those videos?
Yeah, by far the two things that I think make the biggest difference is thumbnail and title. And so you specifically called out the like 5 concepts for developers, JavaScript developers to know. Being a good title, and it's a really fine balancing act because you get in this like almost crossing the line into clickbait. And so there's two kind of aspects of this for me. Like one, I'll do anything with a title and a thumbnail to get the audience's attention up to a certain point. And that point is not then fulfilling the value that was promised in the title and thumbnail. Because you look at terrible clickbait stuff and it's like, here's this really wild thing that you never expected. And then they don't talk about that. And that's bad, right? Like that's how you lose trust. That's how you lose subscribers. That's how you lose an audience and deteriorate your brand. But just from a practical standpoint, like if you want to grow, people have to care about what you have to say, and you have to present it to them in a way that like adds a little bit of urgency for out of all the videos that they scroll through. And let's be honest, a lot of us scroll a lot through YouTube and TikTok, etc. Like what are the things that are going to make them watch my video content? And so title and thumbnail by far make the biggest difference. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to after you get them there with kind of the wow factor being a little clickbaity, you still have to provide on the promise, the value that they're expecting when they come in.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I think clickbait can be appealing to a lot of people because you're like, oh, I want clicks, I want views, I want attention. However, what you touched on, losing trust with people, is definitely true. Also, as far as hard numbers are concerned, if you don't deliver on what the title is about, even like early-ish in the video, your watch time plummets too. And the video in the long run actually doesn't do very well. Like, yeah, you might have a big influx in views if you use some super clickbaity title and thumbnail, but your video is going to die. Like, it's just not going to work unless you are legitimately delivering on what you are promising.
Yeah, absolutely. And the view portion of that is actually kind of interesting because I think some people look at how YouTube judges views and they think about percentage of the video watch, which that's still a helpful metric to look at and kind of gauge based on the individual pieces of content. How are people responding? But it's a little bit less about that percentage. It's more about just how much time do people spend watching your video content. So an example of that would be if I create a 10-minute video and people watch 50% of it, meaning they watch 5 minutes, percentage wise, that's great. Like that's a really high percentage of the video for people to watch. And it's 5 minutes total of watch time. But alternatively, if I create an hour-long video and people only watch, or let's say 100 minutes for easy numbers, let's say a 100-minute long video and people only watch 10 minutes, that's 10% of the video that they're watching, but it's 5 more minutes than the other video where they were watching 5 minutes out of 10. So it's still more time that's actually spent on the YouTube platform, which is what they're looking to drive, is to keep people engaged and staying on YouTube and watching individuals' content.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And one thing I did want to talk to you about, you have courses, you mentioned workshops. Can you tell us a little about that, about what you teach, kind of how you market it, how you package everything, all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's been definitely an evolving journey over the past several years. And I am now, we can talk about this maybe in a little bit, but I'm now doing this full time, which means I have a lot more time to think through how I structure and market and all these things. The first thing I ever did from a course perspective was just a free video series on YouTube. And it was maybe 10 videos of here's how you build an app type thing, like an example tutorial, pretty basic stuff that you would see in a lot of different places. And I still get lots of comments and views from those today. This is 3 or 4 years old at this point. And that was just like taking a bigger idea and kind of breaking it down into chunks to help teach people fundamentals and kind of progress through them. So you start off really early, you build fundamentals, and then you build on top of that as the videos progress. So that was a free thing on YouTube. And then I decided to do my first ever paid course, which has still done really well, surprisingly, almost. But this was a video series on a text editor called VS Code. It's basically like if people do modern web development, it's the default tool that they're going to use. And I think I just timed this really well because I published a course on Udemy And Udemy has been a place where I've taken lots of courses. I've watched lots of other creators' content. And there's a lot of mixed feedback about Udemy. If we want to, we could talk about. But for me, I published my course there. And it's consistently pulled in about $1,000 per month, and some months a couple thousand for the past couple of years, which is really kind of hard to believe. And the benefit of this is Udemy is doing all the marketing. So I didn't market that almost at all myself. What I got fortunate enough to benefit from is getting my course put into, I forget how they phrase it, but basically they're like enterprise plans. So companies will pay for a company subscription. Employees can go and watch a bunch of different videos or courses for free instead of having to pay in for individual ones. And so every time someone watches my course through the enterprise license, I get paid, which is nice. So that worked out really well from a marketing perspective. The downside of Udemy, or one of the downsides, is you don't have much control over pricing. So you can advertise the price at whatever you want, $90, $100, $200. But then Udemy does sales basically every day to sell courses from $10 to $15. Like I've never paid more than $10 or $15 for a course. So from that perspective, if I don't have a choice and my course sells for $10, my cut of that is like $3 or $4. So I'm making $3 or $4 per sale, which gives you an idea of how many sales I've gotten. But the dollar per sale is a lot lower. So then the next progression is to move to a platform where you have more control over pricing and you get a better percentage of what you're selling. And so my next course, I moved to Podia, which I still use today. And Podia, I forget what the number is, but like whatever I decide to sell the course for, I make 97% of that. Like they take the transaction fees or whatever it is behind the scenes, and I pay a monthly subscription. So I pay $80 a month. I get unlimited emails that I can send, an email subscriber base that I can build up. I can sell the courses through there, and I make 90-something% on the dollar of what I sell. So that's kind of the next progression is as you have built an audience, as you have a better understanding of how to market, etc., you have the potential to drive more revenue by having more control over it and marketing yourself than I would have on Udemy, where they do all the marketing for me, but I don't really have any guarantees. And I don't have much control over how much I make per course.
Makes sense. So when you are advertising these courses on your YouTube channel, can you walk us through how you do that? Because for some people, it can be kind of uncomfortable saying like, hey, check out my cool stuff. So what is your, describe your strategy or just how you do it?
Yeah, I think the basic thing is we talked about trust earlier, like that you'll hear if you listen to me talk a lot, I talk about trust. And that's first and foremost, like the number one thing that has to be, have to focus on is making sure that for anything that I create, for any public message or stance that I take, like I have to still earn people's trust and not lose people's trust. And so what that means is people that trust me, people that have watched free content on YouTube, when I come out with something paid, I'm not having to convince them that they enjoy my content or that my content would be valuable. They already trust me. Like they've watched 15, 20, 50 different videos of mine for free. And I've been on the flip side of this where I've gotten a lot of free content from different creators, and I actively want to support them with their paid content, almost regardless of whether or not I actually take the course or participate in the course. Ideally I would, but I would support them just because I've gotten enough value from them from a free YouTube video perspective. So I think that's the thing is, again, focusing on providing that value, keeping that trust, providing free content and value, and then being able to say, like, in a tutorial video, for example, like, let's build this thing. That whole video completely valuable for you, gives you whatever it was that you were looking for in that sense. But now I can say at the end of this, if you enjoyed this video, if you want to do more, if you want to learn about other things that fit into this category or other things that we can use to build even bigger applications, now I've got this free product that you can go and kind of like upgrade to. It's kind of like an upsell. I mean, like I upsold when I worked at a movie theater in high school. Hey, you get popcorn, you can get a soda for $1 more or whatever. But this way I feel like it's much more genuine because I've already provided value. So that's one thing is I think just leveraging an audience where you have them providing value and then also being able to say, hey, I have this paid thing. So that's on the YouTube side. I'm active on Twitter. I have a newsletter, I have a podcast, and all these audiences that you have are ways to communicate the things that you're working on. So a natural, organic way for me to do that through Twitter is just to post about the things that I'm building for the course. and give tips and tricks along the way and provide little snippets of insight and value as I'm working on it. So now people that follow me on Twitter are curious about the thing that I'm working on, and they're maybe going out to the site to find more details. Maybe they signed up for it. Maybe they signed up for the newsletter. Now you're going to continue to get additional free value, but also the reminder that there is a paid course out there for people that are looking to kind of take the next steps.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the main way that you've been able to advertise is really just cultivating a reputation, and that's the foundation, right? And then everything else, you know, your newsletter and just talking about it in your videos, I'm sure it comes pretty naturally once you do that. Like you don't have to craft some manipulative ad or you know, cut to all these different camera angles, add sound effects. It's pretty simple once you have that foundation laid. And I feel like that's the best way to do it. It's probably less work too, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm actually haven't really talked about this yet. I'm pretty simple on editing and stuff. So you mentioned like animations and zoom in and pans and music and all that kind of stuff. Like I do fairly basic editing. There are definitely people that do much more editing and it looks really nice. But for me, my number one thing with content has just been consistency, specifically with YouTube. And if I were to invest too much time in editing, you kind of have to look at like the amount of time invested versus the return. And for me, the amount of time invested for editing is just not that high to then get the return in terms of viewership and comments and that sort of stuff. Again, with the priority being providing value. Like I provide plenty of value, hopefully, with not as much editing as other people, which means I get to continue to create content on a regular basis and stay consistent. So yeah, going back to like then being able to share something that I'm working on that's paid, it is pretty natural because it's kind of a part of the natural conversation. And then I don't have to do anything super special to be able to pitch or sell it. It's just part of that natural conversation.
Mm-hmm. Right on. And I'm glad you talked about editing as well, because yes, your editing is quite simple, but your videos are effective. And I think this is something for anybody who is starting a YouTube channel or already has one, is to think about how much editing do you actually have to do. This is something I've wrestled with over the years. You know, my channel, Treesicle, the first editing that we did, it was really complicated. It took a long time, but it kind of ended up being essential for the channel and the brand and the entertainment value. But it's hard to maintain that. Like it's, and if you're trying to outsource your editing, like pay somebody else to do it, the more technical your editing is, the harder that is to do, the more expensive it is to do. So it is like you have to be honest with yourself, I think, about what you're bringing to the table. And for you, it's clearly like there's the trust in you, there's the way you teach things, and ultimately it's the information you're providing. That's what people are coming to your channel, and you're kind of the vehicle for it. Yeah, you don't need a ton of pizzazz for that, and I think it's good that you you realized that you're saving yourself a lot of headache. As somebody who has sat in front of a computer for way too many hours editing, I'm happy for you, I gotta say.
Yeah, it definitely makes the process a lot easier. And for the past several years, up until 4 months ago, all of this was on the side of doing a full-time job. Now, there was a lot of overlap because my job was creating content for a company and doing public speaking and that sort of stuff. So there's similarities, but all of my YouTube channel and the podcast and Twitter, like all those audiences are just built completely outside of working a 40-hour a week full-time job, just like everybody else. And that means there's like only so much time in the day and in the week to get stuff done, which meant that I had to be really cognizant of time and how efficient I could be with that. Now I do it full time, and I can say as a full-time content creator, there's still never enough time in the day or the week or the year or whatever to get stuff done, or at least the things that you want to. Mm-hmm. But that is one of the things I think I would like to invest some time in, is kind of upping the value of the content from an editing perspective and how deep tutorials go and that sort of stuff. Just kind of take advantage of having a little bit more time to invest in individual pieces of content.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, like, what would that look like to you when you're kind of in your pie in the sky dreaming mindset? How does your current video different than that type of video?
Current video, now that I have more time from 6 months ago or so?
Yeah, I guess so. The videos you're putting out now, they're relatively simple in terms of editing, but you mentioned in the future you'd be interested in making something more complex, it sounds like. What would that be exactly,
Gotcha.
the more complex thing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes from consistency and branding. So I've actually started a process of going through a complete rebrand with my podcast co-host Amy about a year ago, and we haven't made much progress. And mostly that's been because we've been so busy doing other things. We're in the middle of releasing a course, so it's in kind of an open preview now, where we're just releasing content as it's available. But upping or completely going through a rebrand. And what that means from a YouTube perspective is like having new themes for YouTube thumbnails, having standard overlay graphics. One of the downsides I've had in working with a tool called ScreenFlow for editing is you don't get kind of the array of resources that are out there for something like Adobe Premiere from an overlays perspective for text. And so that's one of the things that I would like to move into, is having consistent transitions, branded transitions, and overlays, things like that, where you feel my brand, you feel whatever the color scheme is, and that's going to be consistent across all different pieces of content, from YouTube to TikTok to Twitter, etc. So some of it is taking the time to actually go through with Amy and do that branding, where we have fonts and colors and combinations and templates and that sort of stuff, and then applying those into videos. And then there's subtle things. There's more zoom in effects. There's more transitions. There's more, I'd like to do more kind of personality, inject more personality into YouTube videos. I've done more of that on the TikTok side because it's a more creative and artistic and funny kind of outlet for me. But I like to have more of that in the YouTube stuff as well. So having jokes and like really cheesy zoom in pans on jokes, and then doing like the screen goes to black and white, and the, I don't know, cheesy music that goes along with it. Like those sort of things I appreciate on other channels. And again, just haven't had much of that myself on my own, but I think that is the kind of thing. There's a balance of how much time invested versus the return, but there are little things like that that help people feel more connected to a creator. And again, like that trust and that feeling of being connected, that's where you start to build, I don't know what a legitimate audience, I guess. And there's I forget what the specific quote is, but basically someone at some point who had a big audience said, like, you really know you've made it if you have 1,000 true followers. And true followers would be like, you release something new and those people are on it. Like they know they followed enough of your content to know whatever it is you do next, they're going to follow. And so you think about 160,000 subscribers on YouTube, most of those are pretty passive, right? To get to 1,000 people who consistently care about the things you do, that's a pretty deep connection, and it's not an easy thing to come by. So I think adding some of those touches, some of those details into videos gives more personality, gives more of a connection, and hopefully helps people kind of build further trust and interest in the stuff that I do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Right on. I feel like you've got a good perspective on things here. It's balanced, it's working. So I'm curious about your backstory, like before YouTube, or before you really started getting serious about YouTube. Obviously, you have a background in web development and in coding, but tell us your origin story. Like, where did you come from? How did you kind of come to decide that this was for you?
Yeah. Two key things in my life relevant to that are completely on a whim or unintentional. So I do a lot of career speaking and motivational speaking now. And I love being able to do that because I get to be honest with people to say, like, I had none of this intentionality when I started doing any of this. But I got into college, and that was kind of the standard path. Like, all of my friends were going to college. I was going to go to college. I got into college, and I got into the engineering school, and they asked me what I wanted to study. And I had no idea. I didn't want to do physics or biomed or anything like that. And I'd never done anything with computer science. I'd never programmed. I'd never done any of it. And I was like, I'll do computer science. Thankfully, I loved it and enjoyed it, but that was a whim. That was just a random decision that happened to work out. And then senior year of college, I was applying to jobs just like everybody else. And Microsoft, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, came to recruit on campus. And so I applied for the traditional software engineer role and didn't get it. But they liked me enough to then give me interview for another position, which was called a technical account manager. And I flew out to DC, had in-person interviews with like 40 other people, got rejected, and they sent all the people that got rejected back to the hotel in like limos, which is super awkward. Like, congratulations, you didn't get a job, but here's a limo ride where you're going to be sad with
That's nice of them.
random
Some
people.
champagne.
Yeah. Yeah, there may have even been, I don't know, but really weird scenario. And so I got turned down from 2 roles at Microsoft. They liked me enough to say, like, or the recruiter did, to say, like, all right, maybe those weren't a good fit, but something I said in the interview made them then look at me for a technical evangelist role, which usually people are like really confused by that title. Evangelist has the connotation of people going out and preaching and all that kind of stuff. Well, a technical evangelist kind of does that from a tech perspective. So basically that job, what it would become is speaking at conferences and giving workshops and creating content, basically teaching people of the community about the products and things that we had to offer and educating them on how to build applications and stuff like that. So I never knew anything about that in the past. I'd never created content. I'd never thought about creating a video. I'd never spoken in front of an audience other than the terrible presentations to a room full of 15 or 20 people in college. None of the things that I do now, I had ever thought of as being something that I was interested in. But that was where I started my career. I wasn't going to turn down an opportunity to work at Microsoft. So at the age of 22, I found myself like starting to give talks to audiences at times of developers that had been writing code for as long as I'd been alive. And so I did that more and more, and I fell in love with being on stage. But I think more importantly, I fell in love with teaching. And that's where all the things that I do now come from a passion for teaching, helping educate people from a technical perspective, from a career perspective, giving them advice and motivation and inspiration for things that, again, like I didn't have this thought process at the time. I just fell into computer science. I kind of just fell into working at Microsoft, fell into specifically a role that I'd never imagined that has drastically changed the trajectory of my career and my passion. And so now everything that I do comes from that passion of teaching and being able to help people.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were doing YouTube part-time, were you still in that tech, I can never say this word, evangelist.
Evangelist, there you go.
A tech evangelist. Is that what you were doing when you were part-time YouTube, or had you kind of transitioned from that role?
Yeah, so I transitioned after 3 years at Microsoft, had some family things going on, and my wife and I moved back to Memphis, which is where we are now, where I'm from, and couldn't find a role that made sense at Microsoft. So I left and joined FedEx with the more traditional software engineering role. I think like having done a lot of public speaking and stuff, I was comfortable being a leader and talking to leadership and being able to present technical topics and concepts to people who were less technical. And that was a really big benefit for me. But that was a totally different role than what I'd done before, with basically none of the things that we're talking about now as part of that role. I realized I missed it. And so I started doing it on my own. I started creating the YouTube videos, started paying for my way to go to speak at conferences. And I realized like I liked my job at FedEx, but I was just missing something. I was doing all this stuff on the side. Why not join a modern tech company with a more modern culture and get paid to do all the things that I'm already doing, speaking at conferences, creating content, etc. So I started looking for roles and ended up joining a company called Auth0 a few years ago. And that job was doing all the things that we're talking about, speaking at conferences, giving workshops, creating content, etc. So I was doing that job while also continuing to do the kind of same things on the side for personal brand and personal audience. So was consistently doing that at my time at Auth0. I went to another company to do a similar role about a year ago. And that title has more recently been referred to as a developer advocate. Same type of thing. You'll hear people differentiate, but basically the same thing. And so I did that at the new company for 8 months or so until the summer. And now I do all this full time for myself.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So it seems like you've had that perfect balance of teaching, but also coding. So you've got that hard background. You obviously know what you're doing. And now you've combined them into your own business, essentially. So looking through your backlog, as far as I can tell, your first video that really took off was Visual Studio Code Themes, the 5 hottest of 2019. Was this the kind of transition point where you're like, oh, this is really working? The video currently sits at just over 100,000 views. Tell us about that video taking off, maybe why you think it took off, and how that felt as it was happening.
You know, I don't have specific memories of that because at the time, I think I was still so early to not really know what I was paying attention to. I think a few of those videos also got a lot of traction later on. So not necessarily right when I posted, but there was one thing I was doing is I was at that time also writing corresponding articles for my videos on a platform called scotch.io. The name was the joke to start and then it got successful, but it's web development tutorials. It just happened to be named Scotch. And anyway, so I would do an associated article, which I would get paid for, which is nice, but also embed the video there. And that helped give a boost to some of my videos on YouTube because this platform had a big enough audience where people would come read the article, watch the video, press play, etc. So I don't really have many memories specifically about individual videos, probably at that time, just because I wasn't paying as much attention. But the one thing I did realize is that topic of VS Code, again, just like a universal tool that people could relate to in the ecosystem in which I create content, that topic did really well for my channel, more so than anything else, and still is one of the things that does the best. So 2 keywords on my channel, VS Code and JavaScript. And if you go look at the top videos, all of them will relate back to those 2 things. And so what that then meant is like, yes, I do have some success. I have some inspiration. I have some growth that I can refer back to. But that also made it really clear, if I'm going to create more content, I need to maybe not exclusively create content on those topics, but those are topics that I need to hit. So if you watch the cadence on my channel, you'll see once a month or so, I'll have a vanilla JavaScript video and maybe a VS Code video, because those are the things that people have come to my channel for, they've responded to in the past. So you want to create or continue to create momentum with those types of videos based on the things people are interested in and try to make them fun and interesting for people along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to figure out those keywords to really hit. I think depending on what niche you're in, that can be a tricky part of YouTube, is kind of finding the thing that you can trust to actually do well for you, or at least well enough for you. With coding in particular, it seems like that is, it's almost built in, right? Like you kind of figure out what languages you are willing to teach, and hopefully it's something that is popular, like JavaScript or Visual Studio. And it's out of the, if you can find that avenue for your channel, it's going to be huge. Especially, do you feel like it's relatively easy to come up with ideas for new videos? Because obviously Visual Studio, I mean, there's a ton of different things you can talk about it forever. JavaScript, kind of the same thing. So do you feel like it's easy to come up with topics?
Yeah, there's a couple of different perspectives on that. One, I get that question a lot, or a similar question of how do you come up with new topics? Because I've created 500 videos now or something like that, 450 or something. And the short answer to that is I have no shortage of ideas. Every day I have a new idea for something and I just add it to a backlog. If you look inside of my Notion board, you'll see 100 video ideas that I may or may not ever do because I just have more ideas than I'll ever have capacity to take on. So I just make sure to jot things down when I have ideas, or when I see people post on Twitter about something they created, something they solved, a problem that they had. Like those are the inspirations, especially the one where people post problems. Like now I know that's an actual use case for somebody that I can take, and maybe it's a learning opportunity for me. Like one secret is a lot of content creators use creating content as their learning avenue. So if I want to learn something new, I'll go and learn it to then create content so other people can learn from my learning journey and the stuff that I went through. The other thing is it's always amazing how when you think you've covered a topic, you realize that like there's still the other millions of people in the world that have not seen that video before, regardless of if they're subscribers or not. And what I mean is I've done videos on my entire setup in VS Code. Like here's all the settings that I use. Here's the font. Here's the colors. Here's all these things. And I've got some popular videos with that. But then every video I do from now on that shows VS Code, people are asking me, what font is that? What color scheme is that? Etc. And so that's this constant reminder of like, even though I've had a successful video on a specific topic before, that doesn't mean that there's not a million or millions of other people that didn't see that video that wouldn't still benefit from me doing a very similar video now. And you mentioned the popular video of themes. This is something I haven't done, but now I'm reminded it's something I should. That video is really popular. One of the urgency things with titles and stuff on YouTube is based on a year. So I think that video was like popular VS Code themes in 2019. I haven't done an update to that, but people love that. Like, people love going through from year to year to see what's changed and to see what's new, even though that video has been done before and it wouldn't be that different now. And it wouldn't be a very complicated thing to do now. It's a topic that people are still looking for. So even if you've done a topic before, it doesn't mean you can't do that topic again as a refresher. It doesn't mean there's not a nugget from a previous video that can now be a bigger video that you focus on. And another piece of advice that I think stops people early on in creating is they don't know what to do themselves because they feel like it's all been done before. And you kind of started the conversation by mentioning you feel like this is a space that is kind of saturated with content. And to a certain point, I agree and I understand that perspective and I think it makes sense. But also I look at, like, I feel like I've got a big audience, and I look at friends of mine that have just crossed 1 million subscribers. I looked at a friend of mine that crossed 100 the same time I did, and now she's at 300 or 350 while I'm at 160. Got another friend that's at 2 million. I've got another friend that works for Free Code Camp YouTube channel that has 6 million. Like, as many subscribers as I feel like I have and I'm proud to have, I know there's that many more people out there, millions of people who subscribe to tech channels because that's what they're looking for. So regardless of if someone else has done a topic, regardless of if you've done a topic, there's still a place for you to create more content on a given topic, because the different approach that you take, the different style that you have, the different way that you can teach something, the different way that people can relate to you as an individual, as a content creator, as a teacher, means something. So, like, going full circle back to, like, how do you come up with ideas and do you run out of ideas? I never have a shortage of ideas. And I think the biggest takeaway as a content creator is everything you do throughout the day, you start to realize this is content. Regardless of whether or not you actually, like, make that piece of content, everything I learn, everything I see from someone else is valuable content for someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. It's easy to overthink things, think, oh, this isn't worthy of being online, and, you know, depending on what it is, maybe there's some truth to that. But especially you make weekly videos, sometimes a little more often, it seems. I feel it's better, as a general rule, to post more than less, as long as you, as the creator, are satisfied with what you're putting out. I think it's easy to be overly critical of ourselves and to overanalyze and not be realistic about the fact that whoever is watching this, like, they're not looking at it from the same perspective you are. At least for me, like, I'm my own biggest critic. I think a lot of people who make videos would agree with that. And so I always tell people, just make as many videos as you can without driving yourself crazy, of course. But just understand that at a certain point, you, like, the negative voice in your head isn't necessarily helping you.
Yeah, that's we, like, in the content creation space that I'm in, and especially targeting people that maybe want to be content creators, a lot of it's such a mental conversation. It's such a confidence conversation because so many people struggle with, I don't know what to create. I don't know what I would do differently. It's already been done. I don't have all the equipment. I've never done it before, etc. But you look at, like, it's easy to come to my channel and assume that I've been a good content creator all my life. And that's, like, it couldn't be further from the truth. My first video, if you go back and look, is like a Microsoft live chat headset that's like $30 on Amazon. It's the built-in webcam on the laptop, right? Like, this is where we all started. There was no mic. It was probably just like the headphones that I have on, or no, sorry, it was the, like, live chat thing, or maybe I had a headphone mic or whatever. Like, I started doing that, and I also started not having a strategy or an idea of, like, what my overall brand and content was going to be. But that was stuff I figured out by experimenting and exploring. But most importantly, starting with stuff that I enjoyed. And you start to marry up, like, what are the things I enjoy that people actually respond to? Because I think one of the hardest things that people can do is we tell them consistency and they go out and create consistent stuff on stuff that they don't care about. And that's a hell of a lot harder than doing things that you're actually excited about. And that's why, like, sure, there's times that I like don't feel like recording something or building a demo, etc. But the majority of the time is like, that's not the struggle because it's already things I'm excited about. And I think coming from a place of passion and excitement for the thing that you're teaching, from the thing that you're doing, people also respond to that. So don't be afraid to like get started early. Doesn't matter what equipment you have. It doesn't matter how bad. Again, go back and look at any of my videos. Your early videos are, as long as you do it enough to consistently get better and then see what people respond to and then build on that, you never know where we'll go in the future.
Absolutely. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about, you have some shorts on your channel. YouTube shorts are they can be a controversial subject, but obviously YouTube is trying to compete with TikTok. They are pushing shorts really hard. As somebody in the teaching space, how have shorts been for you? Do you feel like they've been worth it? As far as I can tell, you don't have a ton on your channel relative to your long form content, but what's your experience been like?
Yeah. So to your point, I haven't done it consistently. I haven't done a ton. I haven't like the way we just got through preaching consistency and learning and building on that. I haven't done that with shorts. The reason I've done some is because other content creators have told me how impactful they've been for themselves. So a friend of mine, Kyle, who runs the Web Dev Simplified channel, he just crossed 1 million subscribers, and he said that shorts have been huge for him over the last year. So he does those consistently. We mentioned VS Code, the tool that I've talked about a lot. Their official channel on YouTube and on TikTok has done short form content, and that has helped them find a ton of subscribers out there. So it definitely has paid big dividends for other people. I would say it hasn't done so much for that or for me yet. But in fairness to myself, I haven't given it a real consistent shot. I haven't done it consistently. I haven't experimented with it. So it's still kind of in the back of my mind. I think ideally I would get to the point where I'm doing 1 or 2 of those a week on YouTube. And I do short form content multiple times a week on TikTok. So I spend a little bit more energy there, but a little bit different outlet and audience for me. But I think the biggest thing that is easy to encourage people to do, it's easy to talk about, but also I still have never executed on it to the level I would like to, is being able to repurpose content. And so an example of that is like in every video that I create that's 15 minutes long, there's 5 short minute nuggets in there that are really, really valuable pieces of content that could make sense as short form content. I think for them to be as impactful as you would like for them to be, you would probably re-record those specifically for a minute-long video to make sure that you don't have any like awkward edits or endings or abrupt endings or anything like that. But there's like, with the amount of content that I create, there's a million different nuggets out there that I think people would respond to. And so some of it is dedicating the time to do it. Some of it is paying attention to the things I'm already doing and taking out snippets or repurposing that content in some way. But yeah, so far, not a huge influence or not a huge benefit for me so far with YouTube Shorts. But it's something that I definitely want to do more of and give more of a shot to see if I can drive the impact that a lot of other creators have seen.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I am curious, you mentioned that your TikTok, we'll call it branding or editing or whatever, you said it's more comedic, more creative. Can you tell us a bit about that and how exactly it differs from your videos on YouTube?
Yeah, my stuff on YouTube is pretty straightforward tutorial stuff, which this is something I've talked about for years, is I would like to have more of my personality in that content. But I still go back to, here's how you do a thing. Here's how you customize your thing to look this way. And that's the stuff that people respond to. So that's kind of the audience that I have on YouTube, is just mainly, I think, looking to learn to do something. And I looked at TikTok as a way to experiment with other types of videos, specifically skits, and skits that can poke fun at the tech industry, at tech culture, at programming, things like that. And so it's not the majority of the content that I do, but some of the most successful stuff I've done on TikTok is more of that skit stuff. And this is, again, where I get to inject some personality, but also use it as a platform to present things in a comedic way, but also from a satirical perspective. And you see a lot of this if you search like career advice or TikTok careers or whatever the hashtags are. Like you see people poking fun of cultural things in corporate America. Hey, can you stay late after 5 o'clock? And they're like, no, I'll never do that because I respect myself, type of thing. So you get to use the platform to inject personality, which is fun. You get to be, I think, funny. You can kind of debate that, I guess, whoever's watching, but I think it is. But also then use it as a platform to raise awareness to, like, even though it's funny and satirical, still trying to push people to get what's best for them from a career perspective, from a culture perspective at a company, from a earning money perspective, from being respected as an employee, from their time, from their value, etc. So I feel like it's a cool combination of using it as a creative outlet, as a fun one, being able to throw some humor in there, but also continuing to try to progress the conversation of careers, culture, money, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So now, this is a question I always like to ask people. Now that you're full-time YouTube or full-time working for yourself, what does your day-to-day look like? How is your mindset today different than when you were working, say, a more normal job?
Yeah, the biggest implication is financial. So I was in a very privileged position to have a really good salary. And then in addition to that, be able to generate revenue from content on the side. So the cool thing about that at the time was, like, all the revenue that I generated on the side was kind of just fun money. Like, that's where I was able to scale up cameras and mics and lights and all these things that I use. And, like, you can definitely argue it helps make better content. It does. But I also had a lot more freedom to just spend money because I had it on that sort of stuff and I could experiment more. Now, a little bit different perspective. I don't have the salary from a full-time job to lean on. Now, all the money that I generate, I have to make very strategic decisions of where that gets invested, because now it's going to pay mortgage and bills and groceries and travel and that sort of stuff. And now when I go to travel to a conference, I'm going to be a lot more picky to say, like, I'm not going to come out of pocket for me to go speak at a conference when the conference is going to benefit from my brand. Like, that needs to be something that's fully paid for. And so that's going to be a mindset shift of, like, making sure that I'm not investing, or as little as possible, my own dollars into something where it should be covered from a conference. So there's, like, financial implications of this is just real income now. It's not just stuff that's on the side that I can use for fun. I don't think too much has changed, honestly. Like, it was kind of a fun transition. So we could get into this or not, but I actually transitioned into doing full time because I got let go from my role. They were going through some transitions, and I took, like, one day to think about what I was going to do next. And I was like, this is my chance. I've proven that I can make money. I know I love this. I have tons of other sponsored content that I've never had time to do because I was working a full-time job. I'm going to do this. And so I basically took, like, that Friday off. My wife and I went to play golf. We, like, went to lunch, relaxed. I had the weekend. And then Monday I sat down at my desk and I got to work because it was stuff that I'd already been doing. And so now a lot of that's the same. I have more admin work. There's more emails. There's more meeting with sponsors. There's some formalities that I'm looking to build up. Like, I've never had contracts for sponsored content in the past. I've always kind of had the mindset, like, at some point someone will screw me over and then I'll go and create the contract, but it hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the things that, like, I want to have contracts in place. I want to have standard one pagers that I can send out to people of what I can offer to try to streamline that process. So there's some formality behind that, but working with sponsors, creating content, doing taxes, like, these are all things that I've been doing for 3 or 4 years already. So that's not necessarily new. I just get to invest more time in it. But I also then get to look, ideally, a little bit more, like, longer term, like, not just how can I execute on a sponsorship for this month or the rest of this calendar year. How do I look a little bit more forward to building something that's going to be even bigger longer term? So how do I give myself a goal next year of, I don't know what it is like going through that rebranding process and intentionally designing web pages to gear people towards the things that I'd like to offer. Having a speaking page to get paid to speak at events, having a sponsoring page on my website to give people those details, give them a structure of here's where to email me, here's the details that I need if you're interested, type of thing. So I think it's adding formality and trying to think a little bit more ahead in terms of what I do and where I invest time. But the majority of the stuff I do is stuff that I've been doing on the side for the past 3 or 4 years. I just get to spend more time doing it now.
Mm-hmm. which sounds like you were fully prepared. As you said, this is stuff you were already doing. You took 3 days off, and 2 of those were the weekends. Monday you get to work. It seems like it was really smooth. For me, my transition to full-time YouTube, it was also, I guess it was pretty smooth, I would say. I feel like your process with making videos, because they are like you're able to release once a week with yourself just working on them, you already had your process down. For me, our videos it's like very scripted and voiceover, highly edited. I don't know, it felt very chaotic, I guess, working on it. So I think when you have content like yours, that can be really comforting and kind of its own beautiful thing, where you kind of know what to do and how to do it, and you don't have to like dot a million I's and cross a million T's. It's just a matter of kind of sitting down and doing it and delivering the useful information with the skills you had built over the years of, being able to speak with charisma. So that's wonderful, man. I'm happy for you. I really am. So to kind of wrap things up, we're getting towards the end here. This is also a question I like to ask people. It's a little generic, but I always like to ask it. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for succeeding on YouTube or online in general, what would it be?
Sure. I'll go a little bit more broad and then maybe attach it to kind of the content creation space. And it's to change your mindset to be in control of your career. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like when I was at FedEx, I was surrounded by people, not all of them, and I enjoyed a lot of my teammates, but culturally what I heard a lot was, this job sucks, but this is all I have, right? Or like, I'm not going to put in the effort to find something else. And that's just so sad. And I grew up, like, my parents never really had careers, like never made much money at all. A job was always a job. It was never a career. I never saw people who were excited to go to work. And at this point in my career, when I talk about taking control of your career, my advice is to look at the things that you don't enjoy and find a way to do less of that, and to look at the things that you do enjoy and find a way to do more of that. Because all of this stuff should be like, make as much money as you possibly can, but also do things that you enjoy, because that's going to be really the difference maker, I think, of just overall happiness in your career and work-life balance and all that sort of stuff. So if you're unhappy with the job that you're doing now, if you haven't communicate that. Talk to a boss. If you're not getting a good response there, they're not really willing to invest that time into trying to find some way to help you, go look at other teams. If that's not an option, go look at other companies. And I'm not saying that this is the kind of thing that just changes overnight, but instead of having the mentality of, I'm just stuck here and it sucks and that's what it is, like, have the mentality of, what can I work on to start to make that change? So if there's a skill set that you can add to go and do a next step in your career, like, go and work on that thing outside of work to put yourself in a better position to get there. So that's the overall, like, super high level advice of, like, change your mentality, look at what you have control over, and go and act on those things to influence your career. The specific tie-in to content creation is, like, not everyone wants to be a content creator. Totally understand. It's an interesting space to be in, but one of the benefits of being a content creator at multiple different scales, like well before where I am now, is the influence that can have on your career from career opportunities. For example, people that you've earned trust from as they're hiring for employees. If you were to go hire, or if you were to go apply there, they've seen a YouTube video, they've read an article, they've seen how you respond with intentionality and understanding and empathy on Twitter, something that seems like really whimsical. If people have that context for you, that's going to give you a big leg up for that job. Because I hear from a lot of recruiters and people giving advice, and general advice is like, stop applying to things blindly. Stop just throwing in your resume where people have no idea where you are, because it just doesn't, the return is just not very high. So reach out to a recruiter, reach out to an employee that works there, make some sort of connection. And if you use content creation to be that gateway, it can start to open up opportunities for you that you may have never dreamed of. Like, I never thought I would be a full-time content creator, for example. But when I was applying for my job at Augie, I had a resume, but on that resume was, at the time, 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Drastically different than where I am now. But also, if you want to know that I know my tech stuff, go watch a video. If you want to know that I know how to communicate and talk to people, go watch a video. Like, I've got all these resources that show you that I know what I'm doing in this field, versus somebody just submitting a resume with words on a page are just words on a page. They don't mean that much. So content creation, even if you have no desire to be a full-time content creator, if you get in the habit of sharing, you never know what sort of opportunities those will lead to. And I guess I'll give one last example. When I got let go from my job, I said I took about a day to kind of think about what I was going to do next. And I decided on full-time content creation. During that day, I sent a message on Twitter just to say, hey, this is what happened. I may be looking for roles. If you're hiring, let me know, or send me a message. 100 messages over the course of 24 hours. Again, I've got a bigger audience than the average person, so I understand that difference. But I got all of those messages and those potential offers, or at least invitations for interviews, because of having earned respect in the community from the content that I've created, from helping people, from teaching people, etc. So content creation can be that gateway, that leg up, that kind of like superpower of enabling extra career opportunities, even ones that you maybe didn't think existed before.
Mm-hmm. So true. Love the advice. Well, James, why don't you tell people where they can find you, all that good stuff. I know you got a podcast, you got Instagram, Twitter. Yeah, be shameless.
Sure. Yeah, so James Q Quick on basically everything. So really active on Twitter, spend more and more time, for better or for worse, on TikTok. YouTube is the same. On Instagram, not very active there. And then we have a weekly podcast called compressed.fm, where we do weekly episodes about web development and design with my podcast co-host Amy Dutton. So that's compressed.fm.
Mm-hmm. There you go. There you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Make sure to follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, so you can hear my voice and somebody else's voice in the next one. Later, everybody.